Do you like point-and-click adventures? Do you enjoy listening to classical music? Do you appreciate the beauty of Renaissance art? Do you laugh every time you watch those silly Monty Python animations? If your answer to all those questions was yes, then I've got the game for you. Four Last Things is the second game made by Joe Richardson and was successfully kickstarted back in July 28, 2016. The moment I saw this game, I immediately said to myself, yep, I need this. I haven't played his first game though, so I went into this one completely blind. Before we start with the review, I should point out something. You might notice that some parts of the screen are blurred out. I did that to avoid spoiling any puzzles I've already solved. The game's title is based on the 7 Deadly Sins and the 4 Last Things, a painting by Hieronymus Bosch, or more likely by one of his followers. The painting depicts the 7 deadly sins laid out on a disc, with the 4 last things, death, the Last Judgment, heaven, and hell, each at one corner of the painting. You play as an old peasant who has committed all 7 deadly sins in his lifetime and wants to confess them after waking up from a nightmare regarding the original sin. But as soon as he reaches the church, he finds out that it's not that easy. Apparently, all his sins were committed outside the jurisdiction of this church, so he isn't allowed to confess them here. That is, unless he exploits a specific loophole. The bishops explain that if he commits all 7 deadly sins again, but within their parish, he'd be able to confess all his sins. And that's your goal. Commit each one of the 7 deadly sins so you'd be allowed to confess them all. The story is ridiculous and I love it. It's the same level of absurdity the Monkey Island series is known for, but with a subtle, cynical view on religion. The writing is quite good. The subtle message behind the story is interesting and most of the jokes were very well written, though some of them felt pretty forced. And without spoiling the ending, I will say that it's definitely not what I was expecting. It was so different from the rest of the game, it ended up being quite jarring, without seeming out of place. It was a very effective ending that I genuinely liked. Reviewing this game's graphics would be a very bold move, since that means I'd be reviewing the works of legendary artists that only the most sophisticated art critics would dare to critique. So I won't. Instead, I'll just review Joe's animation. The cutout animation is similar to that of Monty Python's Terry Gilliam, where all the art is made by cutting out snippets from famous paintings and pictures, sticking them together, then animating them puppet style. For this game, Joe exclusively used Renaissance-era paintings, with some additions here and there, of course. I've seen some people complain about how difficult it is to find hotspots, since everything is taken from paintings and all, but I honestly didn't find any issue with it. Hotspots usually tend to stick out and are never too small to not notice. The developer also included all paintings used to make this game within the game's art gallery. It was quite interesting seeing the origins of these characters and areas. Makes one truly appreciate the work Joe put into animating this game. As for the music, the game's soundtrack consists entirely of famous classical music, so there's not much point in talking about it. I will say, however, that having each piece being played by an actual person in the room was a very nice touch. You can't even talk to them, they're just there. Although, you can have a lute jam with the lute player. Speaking of talking, there's no voice acting in this game, which feels kinda weird. Don't get me wrong, that didn't deduct from my overall enjoyment, but I still feel like adding Monty Python-like voice acting would have gone a long way.
Can't have egg, bacon, spam and sausage without the spam! Why not? No! It wouldn't be egg, bacon, spam and sausage, would it?
As I mentioned before, the game is a point-and-click adventure where your goal is to commit all 7 deadly sins. Each time you commit one, Boss's painting appears and tells you which one you've committed. The interface is similar to that of Curse of Monkey Island and Full Throttle, where clicking on a hotspot with the left mouse button brings up 3 icons. The eye icon is for looking at stuff, the mouth icon is for talking, and the hand icon is for picking up things and slapping people. Why do I find this so funny? I swear I laugh at the stupidest things sometimes. Oh, and the right mouse button does this. As far as I know, it's a completely useless function. You know, for an old man, he's pretty agile. Your inventory is neatly tucked away at the top of the screen for easy access. I like it when games do that. It really bugs me when point-and-click adventures use needlessly complicated inventory systems that require you to click out of the box. As far as puzzles go, they're pretty good. As silly as they were, most of them were properly signposted and hinted at. And since your main goal is the 7 sins, most puzzles lead to committing them. What I like most about this is that you can pursue these sins in any order you want. Although, not all sins required puzzles to commit. 2 of them just happened. I don't know why there weren't any puzzles designed for them, really. I won't mention which 2, but 2 out of 7 is not a small amount. And the game is pretty short with very few locations as is. I finished the game in about 2 hours, so I can't help but feel that it could have been much better if he added those puzzles. To be fair though, it's not as bad as it sounds, considering the reasonable asking price and the enjoyment I had with the game. Also, none of the puzzles were particularly challenging. The game overall was pretty easy, which was somewhat disappointing. My favorite puzzle in the game, which I won't spoil, was a very well designed one, so it's a shame that there weren't more puzzles like it. Overall, this was a delightful experience. The writing was humorous, the story was silly, the subtle messages were interesting, and the puzzles were well made, albeit a bit easy. It's a very solid game that had the potential to rival the Monkey Island series, especially Secret of Monkey Island. And I'm pretty excited for Joe's next game, The Procession to Calvary, which was successfully funded on Kickstarter not too long ago and is set to be released April 2019. From what I've seen so far, it looks like more of the same, which is definitely a plus to me. If he can deliver the same quality writing and animation but on a bigger scale and with more challenging puzzles, it might have a chance at becoming one of the best point-and-click comedy adventures out there. Up there with Monkey Island 2 and Day of the Tentacle. If you're in the mood for a fun little adventure game with silly humor and interesting visuals, you can't go wrong with this one. You can get Four Last Things for $7.99 on Steam or $3.99 on Google Play or the App Store. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.